My pregnant sister-in-law hated my allergic son so much she left peanut butter traps for him because she had cravings. When I confronted her, she just sneered and asked, "Well, did he die?" I tried to let it go, for the sake of my husband and for family peace, until she tried it again when I wasn't home. That's when I finally called the police. And what they eventually found in the trunk of her car confirmed my absolute worst nightmare. It wasn't just about cravings. It was a calculated plan, and my son was the target. Before we get into the absolute insanity of what happened, I just want to say thank you for being here. Takes a lot to talk about this. Let me know in the comments what city or country you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. It helps me feel like I'm not alone in this. Okay. Let's start from the beginning. My life up until that point was beautifully, wonderfully boring. My husband Tom and I had built a quiet, happy home in a leafy suburb just outside Cleveland, Ohio. We had 3 wonderful kids, and our life revolved around school plays, soccer practice, and backyard barbecues. But our oldest, Leo, was our little miracle, and our constant source of worry. When he was just 2 years old, we discovered he had a severe, life-threatening peanut allergy. And we learned it in the most terrifying way imaginable. It was at his cousin's birthday party. A well-meaning aunt who didn't know handed him a small piece of a peanut butter cookie. I saw it from across the room and my heart stopped. I ran, but I was too late. He'd already taken a tiny bite. What followed is a blur of absolute terror that's burned into my memory. The frantic screaming, the hives that erupted across his tiny body like a furious rash, the horrifying swelling of his little face and lips until he was almost unrecognizable. The worst part was the sound, the high-pitched, desperate wheezing as his airway began to close. On the frantic drive to the hospital, I sat in the back with him, watching the life drain from his eyes, his lips turning a horrifying shade of blue. At the ER, a team of doctors and nurses swarmed him, and one of them looked at me with grave eyes and said, "You got him here just in time. A few more seconds." We didn't need to hear the rest. From that day forward, our home became a sanctuary. A hermetically sealed, 100% guaranteed safe space. We read every label, we educated every family member, we drilled every babysitter. The rule was simple and non-negotiable. Nothing with peanuts ever crossed our threshold. It wasn't a preference. It was a matter of life and death. So when my brother, Mark, called me in a panic one Tuesday, I tried to be the supportive sister. "Hey Laura," he started, his voice strained. "I know this is last minute, but the fumigators found some issues at the new house. We can't move in for another week. Is there any way at all that Jessica and I could crash with you guys?" My heart sank a little. Mark was my only brother, and I loved him dearly. But his wife Jessica, she and I were like oil and water. She had a sharp edge to her, a way of looking at my life, my home, my kids with a faint, almost imperceptible smirk of condescension. But she was pregnant, hormonal, and my brother sounded desperate. Mark had always been fiercely protective of her, often making excuses for her behavior by mentioning a tough childhood she'd had, which always made me bite my tongue and try to be more compassionate. "Of course," I said, pushing my hesitation down. "Your family. Come on over." The trouble started not even 3 hours after they arrived. I came home from picking up the younger kids from school to find Jessica lounging on our couch, scrolling through her phone. On the coffee table in front of her was a fortress of forbidden snacks. A family-sized bag of peanut butter crackers, a box of peanut-filled granola bars, a king-size pack of chocolate peanut butter cups. The nutty, oily aroma, a smell that was the equivalent of a fire alarm in our house, assaulted me the second I walked in. Felt like a physical violation. My heart started to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "Hey Jessica, welcome," I said, my voice unnaturally bright. "I'm so sorry, I should have reminded you again. But we absolutely can't have any of this stuff in the house. You know, because of Leo's allergy." She looked up from her phone, her eyes giving me a slow, bored once-over. She popped a cracker into her mouth, chewed deliberately, and then said, "Oh, right. That. It's just these pregnancy cravings, you know? They're totally out of my control. It's not a big deal. I'll be careful not to eat them around him." I felt a hot flash of anger. "I'm sorry, but that's not good enough," I said, my voice firmer now. "Even the dust, the residue on your hands, It can trigger a reaction. The house has to be 100% peanut-free. It's the only way we can guarantee he's safe. She let out a long theatrical sigh, the kind a teenager gives their nagging mother, and rolled her eyes so hard I'm surprised they didn't fall out. Fine, she muttered, turning her attention back to her phone. Whatever. She didn't move. The snack sat there, a monument to her indifference. I stood there for a moment, a cold, hard knot forming in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just carelessness. Felt like a statement. Felt like contempt. I tried to tell myself it was just for a week. What could possibly go wrong? I had no idea that I had just welcomed a monster into my home. The next few days were a special kind of suburban hell. I felt like a warden in my own home, my every nerve ending alight with anxiety. Our house, once our sanctuary, now felt like a minefield. I found myself following Jessica around with a sanitizing wipe, cleaning every surface she touched, doorknobs, the remote control, the kitchen counter. Each time she would give me a look of pure disdain, a silent judgment that painted me as a hysterical, overprotective mother. Relax a little, she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. You're going to give yourself a heart attack. The tension at the dinner table was suffocating. I'd prepare a meal, carefully ensuring everything was safe for Leo, and Jessica would push the food around her plate, sighing about how she was craving a good old PB&J. It was a constant, passive-aggressive jab, a little reminder that my son's life-threatening condition was a personal inconvenience to her. Mark, my poor brother, was stuck in the middle, his face a permanent mask of strained cheerfulness as he tried to bridge the icy chasm between us. Just be patient with her, Laura. He'd plead with me in quiet moments. The hormones are really hitting her hard. She doesn't mean it. But she did mean it. I could see it in the cold satisfaction in her eyes every time I flinched. The breaking point, the moment this Cold War turned hot, came on a Thursday morning. I woke up before anyone else, the house still cloaked in that quiet pre-dawn stillness. I tiptoed downstairs to make coffee and get a head start on the day. I opened the refrigerator, and the air rushed out of my lungs in a silent scream. My blood literally ran cold. I could feel it, a frigid wave washing over me from head to toe. There on the second shelf, right at eye level for a curious 7-year-old, was a plate. On it sat a half-eaten sandwich, practically oozing with creamy, thick peanut butter. It wasn't wrapped. It wasn't in a container. It was just sitting there, a sticky, deadly trap, positioned right next to the carton of orange juice that Leo drank from every single morning. His little hands could have so easily brushed against it. I didn't scream. I was too cold, too focused. My rage was a solid, sharp thing inside my chest. This was not an accident. This was a message. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely grip the plate. I carried it at arm's length as if it were radioactive waste, and dumped it into the outside trash can, burying it under a bag of coffee grounds. Then I marched upstairs. My steps were heavy, deliberate on the creaking wood. I knocked on their bedroom door, a sharp, insistent rap. Jessica opened it, wrapped in a luxurious silk robe, her face a mask of annoyance at being woken up. What? She snapped, her voice raspy with sleep. The sandwich, Jessica, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet, stripped of all emotion. In the refrigerator. What in God's name were you thinking? She stared at me blankly for a second, a flicker of something. Was it fear? Recognition? In her eyes before it was gone. Then she shrugged, a lazy, indifferent movement of her shoulders. Oh, that. I got hungry in the middle of the night. It was just a little snack. Oops, I guess I forgot to put it away properly. Then she gave me a small, condescending smile. A smile that twisted my insides into knots. And she said the words that made something inside me shatter. Anyway, nothing happened to him, right? Right. The word echoed in the silent hallway. The sheer, callous, breathtaking indifference of it stole my breath. This wasn't about forgetting. This was about not caring. This was about my son's life being less important than her midnight snack. My voice came out as a low hiss. Get dressed. You and Mark. You need to talk to me in the kitchen. Now. I laid it all out for my brother, my voice shaking with a fury I could no longer contain. The constant jabs, the eye-rolling, and now this. This blatant, stunning disregard for his nephew's life. Mark looked pale and exhausted, like a man being pulled in two different directions. He wrung his hands, falling back on the same tired excuses. She's pregnant, Laura, she's forgetful. She didn't mean any harm. Didn't mean any harm? I shrieked, my voice finally cracking, tears of rage springing to my eyes. Mark, do you understand what could have happened? Do you get it? If Leo had woken up before me, if he'd been thirsty and just grabbed that juice carton, if his little hand had just brushed against that plate, we would be in an ambulance right now. Or worse. That's when Jessica deployed her ultimate weapon. She started to cry. Not quiet, remorseful tears. These were big, gulping, theatrical sobs. She accused me of bullying her, of ganging up on her, of stressing her out during her delicate condition. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. And a part of Mark, the part of him that was hardwired to be her protector, fell for it completely. He wrapped his arms around her, glaring at me over her shaking shoulders as if I were the monster. It was in that moment I realized my brother was truly lost in her web. He saw a fragile, misunderstood, pregnant woman. I saw a calculating, dangerous manipulator who had just tested a boundary. And she had learned that my own brother would side with her, even over his own family's safety. Mark convinced me to let them stay the last 2 nights for his sake. A mistake that would almost cost my son his life and reveal a darkness I never knew existed. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have thrown them out right then and there? Let me know in the comments, because honestly I still question my decision every single day. The final 2 days of their stay were an exercise in Arctic silence. Jessica stayed in her room, playing the part of the wounded victim, while I scrubbed my kitchen from top to bottom as if trying to erase the very memory of her presence. The relief I felt when their car pulled out of my driveway on Saturday morning was so profound, so immense, it made me feel dizzy. The air in my house felt lighter. My shoulders, which had been hunched up around my ears for a week, finally relaxed. Our sanctuary was safe again. For a few glorious weeks there was blessed silence. We fell back into our happy, normal routine. I almost managed to convince myself it was just a horrible one-off incident, a perfect storm of pregnancy hormones and personality clashes. Then the phone calls from Jessica started again. Not to me, of course. She called Mark every day, crying, telling him how much she missed him, how sorry she was, how the stress of the new house had made her not herself. And then one evening Mark approached me, holding his phone out to me like a peace offering. His eyes were pleading. "She wants to talk to you," he said. "She's been really remorseful, Laura. I think you should hear her out." My stomach twisted into a familiar, painful knot. I didn't want to. I wanted to tell him to lose my number until he came to his senses. But I looked at my brother's exhausted, hopeful face and I gave in. I took the phone. On the other end of the line, Jessica was a waterfall of apologies. She sobbed. She choked on her words. She said she was so ashamed of her behavior she couldn't sleep at night. She blamed the hormones, the stress, everything but herself. And then came the hook. "I'm turning 30 next weekend," she sniffled. "I'm having a small party at our new place. Please, Laura. Please come. It would mean the world to me. It'll be my peace offering. I swear on my unborn baby's life, the entire house will be a completely 100% peanut-free zone. I want us to be a family again." Her words were honey-laced poison. Every instinct in my body screamed, "No." Felt wrong. Felt like a trap. But my husband Tom, ever the optimist, said, "Maybe she really is sorry. People can change." And Mark was begging. So, against my better judgment, a judgment I would curse myself for later, I agreed. We made a pact, though. Tom and I would go, but only for an hour. And the kids would absolutely not be coming. I told Jessica they had a sleepover with a friend. It was a lie. They were safe at home with my most trusted longtime sitter, a woman who knew Leo's allergy protocol better than I did. That gut feeling, that cold, slithering dread in the pit of my stomach, wouldn't go away. The party was as awkward as I'd anticipated. There were only a few of her friends there, and the air was thick with unspoken tension. Jessica was cloyingly sweet, her smile plastered on but never reaching her cold, watchful eyes. The very first thing she asked when we walked through the door was, "Oh, where are the kids?" I was so hoping to see Leo and the others. The disappointment in her voice was so over the top, so fake, it made the hairs on my arms stand up. Throughout the stilted small talk, she kept circling back to them. It's such a shame Leo isn't here, she said with a dramatic pout. I went to this special bakery and got nut-free cupcakes, just for him. That was thoughtful of you, I said, my voice tight. My internal alarm bells weren't just ringing anymore. They were screaming a deafening siren. Then came the moment. The grand finale of her performance. Okay, everyone, she chirped, clapping her hands together. Time for cake. Mark, honey, she cooed, looking at my brother with wide, innocent eyes. Can you do me a huge favor and bring out that special, totally safe, nut-free cake I made? It's on the top shelf of the fridge. Mark, my poor, trusting, naive brother, beamed with pride. He thought this was it. This was her grand gesture, her ultimate apology. He was so happy, so relieved that his wife and his sister were finally mending fences. You got it, babe, he said, and disappeared into the kitchen. I suddenly felt suffocated. I needed air. I mumbled a quick excuse about needing the restroom and slipped down the hall. I splashed some cold water on my face, looking at my reflection in the mirror. Get a grip, Laura, I told myself. You're being paranoid. When I walked out a few minutes later, Tom was standing by the front door, his face a thundercloud of pure fury. He was holding my purse. We are leaving, he growled, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. Right now. I was utterly confused. What? We can't just leave. Mark is about to bring out the cake. I started to argue, pushing past him to offer a quick, polite goodbye. And then I saw it. The dining room had been transformed in my absence. Where there had been an empty buffet table before, there was now a lavish, sickening dessert spread. A glistening peanut butter pie. A platter of peanut butter cookies. A tray of peanut butter brownies. A plate of peanut butter fudge. It was a shrine to my son's deadly allergen. And in the center of it all, my brother Mark stood frozen, holding a large, ornate birthday cake, frosted with a thick, unmistakable layer of chunky peanut butter icing. He was staring down at it, the color completely drained from his face, his expression a mask of dawning, abject horror as he finally understood the depths of his wife's deception. Jessica's eyes found mine across the room. A triumphant, venomous smile spread slowly across her face. In front of all her friends, she raised her voice so everyone could hear. It's my birthday, she declared, her voice dripping with malice. I think I get to have my cravings. Everybody eat up before she throws it all out again. And that's when her mask didn't just slip, it shattered. And the face underneath was one of pure, calculated hatred. The police were called, but that was only the beginning of our nightmare. The aftermath of the birthday party was a chaotic blur. Jessica's triumphant smile crumbled the moment one of her own friends, a horrified-looking woman I'd never met, pulled out her phone and called 911. When Mark, his face ashen and his hands trembling, tried to confront her, she completely lost it. She didn't just cry. She had a full-blown violent breakdown in the parking lot as we tried to leave, screaming obscenities, clawing at him, accusing him of betraying her. It was a terrifying spectacle. The police and paramedics arrived, and after a brief, chaotic scene, she was taken away for an emergency psychiatric evaluation. The diagnosis came back a few days later, and it was grim. It wasn't just pregnancy hormones. The doctors said she was suffering from a severe, underlying mental illness, likely a personality disorder, that had been dangerously exacerbated by the stresses of pregnancy. She was involuntarily committed to a long-term psychiatric facility. A few months later, our niece, baby Chloe, was born. With Jessica still institutionalized and Mark a shattered, grieving shell of the man he used to be, the courts made a temporary custody arrangement. Chloe came home from the hospital to live with us. Our house, once a fortress against a single allergen, was now filled with the sweet, exhausting chaos of a newborn again. Bottles in the sink, diapers on the changing table, a portable crib wedged into the corner of our bedroom. And through it all, my son Leo was the most incredible doting cousin. He would sit by her bouncy seat for hours, his voice soft and gentle as he showed her pictures in his favorite books, a fierce, protective love shining in his eyes. Mark was devastated but trying to heal. He came over every single day after work, his face lighting up the moment he saw his daughter. One evening he told me that Jessica's psychiatrist, a Dr. Evans, wanted to arrange a family therapy session. She thinks it might be a crucial part of Jessica's recovery, he said, his voice laced with a desperate hope. My first visceral instinct was a hard, resounding no. The thought of being in the same room with that woman, of looking at her face, made my skin crawl. But Mark begged me. The doctor thinks it might help her understand the reality of what she did, Laura. For Chloe's sake. Just one session. Please. So I went. The facility was as grim and depressing as you'd imagine. Pale beige walls that seemed to absorb all the light, the persistent, cloying smell of disinfectant, the distant, echoing sounds of a television and muffled crying. When a nurse led Jessica into the small, sterile conference room, I barely recognized her. The vibrant, malicious woman from the party was gone. This version of Jessica was thin. Her skin had a grayish pallor, and her eyes were dull and vacant. She looked broken. She sat across the table from me, her bony hands trembling as she clasped them together. And she seemed genuinely, deeply remorseful. I wasn't well, she whispered, her eyes fixed on her hands. Tears began to stream silently down her pale cheeks. I'm still not well. But I'm starting to understand what I did. I put your son in danger. I tried to hurt you. And now you're taking care of my baby. Her voice broke and she let out a raw, painful sob. You're a better person than I could ever be. You're the mother she deserves. It was a stunningly disarming performance. Part of me, the part that had been fueled by pure, righteous rage for months, wanted to scream at her, to hold on to my anger like a shield. But seeing her so defeated, so utterly pathetic, it was hard not to feel a flicker of human sympathy. Maybe, I thought, my heart aching with a confusing mix of emotions, maybe this is what healing looks like. As the session ended, I wanted to offer some small gesture of peace, for Mark's sake. I pulled out my phone and showed her a recent picture of Chloe, sitting in her bouncy seat, giggling with delight as Leo made silly faces at her just out of frame. She's so happy, I said softly. She's a really happy baby. Jessica looked at the photo of her smiling daughter. Then her eyes shifted slightly, focusing on the corner of the picture where you could just see Leo's arm. And for a fraction of a second I saw it again. A flicker of something cold, something reptilian and dark, in the depths of her eyes. It was there and gone so fast, a momentary hardening of her gaze, that I convinced myself I must have imagined it. I left that day feeling emotionally drained, but with a tiny fragile seed of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she was getting better. I was so incredibly dangerously wrong. The real terror was just getting started. That single therapy session, intended to promote healing, instead opened a Pandora's box of psychological warfare. Jessica was now permitted supervised phone calls, and that small connection to the outside world became her new weapon. First it seemed innocent enough. She would call to speak with Mark, and then ask to have the phone held up to baby Chloe's ear so she could sing lullabies to her. The calls were brief, supervised by a nurse on her end. Mark saw it as progress, a sign that the maternal, loving part of her was re-emerging. I saw it as an intrusion, a ghost haunting our home through the phone lines. Then the gifts started arriving. It began with a beautiful, expensive-looking layette set for Chloe, then a high-tech baby swing. Sweet, normal things a mother separated from her child might send. Mark was so touched. His eyes would well up with tears. See? He'd say to me, his voice thick with emotion. She's trying, Laura. She really is. But then the scope of the gifts widened. A brand new gaming console arrived for my youngest son. A pair of limited edition sneakers that my daughter had been begging for appeared on our doorstep. Each gift was perfectly, unerringly chosen. A testament to the fact that she had been paying meticulous predatory attention during her short stay with us. With every package came a handwritten note, filled with gushing, overly emotional gratitude for our help, always signed with a flourish and a cluster of hearts and smiley faces. On the surface, it was an overwhelming display of generosity. Underneath, it felt suffocating. Felt like a bribe. It felt like she was trying to buy my children's affection, to weave her influence back into our lives, one expensive gift at a time. While her gift-giving campaign was in full swing, my own life took a sudden, brutal hit. I had been in the final stages of interviewing for a marketing director position at a major company downtown. It was my dream job, a significant step up in my career. I had aced the final interview and was practically floating on air, just waiting for the official offer call. Then one afternoon I received a short, cold form letter email. Thank you for your interest, but the position has been filled by another candidate. I was crushed. I couldn't understand what had gone wrong. A few days later, I got a cryptic text from a friend who worked in their HR department. It was off the record, she warned me, but she felt I needed to know. They had received an anonymous reference letter about me. It was a character assassination. It painted me as an emotionally unstable, vindictive person, prone to violent outbursts. It even claimed, with chilling specificity, that I was currently under investigation by Child Protective Services for endangering a relative's baby. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. It was her, Jessica. From inside a locked psychiatric facility, she had found a way to reach out and systematically destroy my career. There was no way to prove it, but I knew it with a certainty that settled deep in my bones. It was a targeted, vicious attack designed not just to hurt me, but to ruin my reputation and isolate me. The very next day, the most unsettling gift of all arrived. It was a large, cheerfully wrapped box addressed directly to Leo. He was so excited. I, however, felt a wave of nausea. I opened it for him, my hands shaking. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a custom-made teddy bear. It was soft and cute, except for one horrifying detail. On its plush, furry wrist it wore a tiny red fabric medical alert bracelet, a perfect miniature replica of the one Leo had to wear every single day of his life. And tucked beside the bear was a large, fancy jar of artisanal honey. I pulled out the card. It was written in a loopy, almost childish script, in a cheerful pink ink. It read, "Honey is so much sweeter than peanut butter, don't you think? Hope you love your new best friend. Love, Aunt Jessica." My son stood beside me, his little face a mask of confusion and dawning fear. "Why would she send this, Mom?" he asked, his voice a small, trembling whisper. "Is she still mad at me about the peanut butter?" I pulled him into a fierce hug, my own heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "No, sweetie," I lied, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "She's just sick." But we both knew the truth. This wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It was a piece of psychological torture. It was a declaration of war. I called her psychiatrist immediately, my voice shaking with rage. But I knew in my gut that this was escalating far beyond what any doctor or therapist could control. The teddy bear was the last straw for me. It was a calculated act of cruelty, aimed directly at a child. But Mark, my brother, was still trapped in a fog of denial and desperate hope. He saw it as a misguided gesture, the clumsy attempt of a sick person trying to apologize. "Maybe she's trying to show she understands now," he argued, his voice weak. He needed to believe she was getting better. He needed definitive, undeniable proof that the woman he had married was not just sick but evil. He got that proof in the most horrifying way imaginable. With their apartment lease officially ending, Mark finally had to face the painful task of clearing out the last remnants of the life he had shared with Jessica. He asked me to come with him for moral support. I think he was afraid of what he might find, or perhaps just afraid of being alone with the ghosts of his dead marriage. The apartment was eerie and silent, a time capsule of their former life. Wedding photos smiled down from the walls, a stark, painful reminder of happier times. Tiny, unused baby clothes were neatly folded in the nursery they had painted together. A thin layer of dust covered everything, a shroud over a life that had imploded. It was profoundly sad. We worked in silence for a while, packing boxes, the only sound the scrape of cardboard and the rustle of packing paper. We were in the master bedroom, clearing out the last of her personal effects, when he opened the drawer of her nightstand. Tucked beneath a stack of old magazines was a small, unassuming leather-bound journal. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, washed over me. "Mark, maybe we shouldn't," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I have to know, Laura," he said, his face pale and determined. "I have to know what was real." He sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first few pages were what you might expect. Excited musings about her pregnancy, lists of baby names, her hopes and dreams for their little family. But then about a third of the way through, the tone began to shift, to curdle into something dark and resentful. My name started appearing with increasing frequency. The handwriting, once neat and flowing, became angry and jagged, the pen digging so hard into the paper it almost tore through. Mark read one entry aloud, his voice trembling and barely audible. It was from a few months before she got pregnant. "Laura thinks she's so perfect with her perfect house and her perfect kids. She has no idea what it's like to really struggle. She looks down on me, I can see it in her eyes. The pity. I hate her for it. It got darker. So much darker. We found the entry from the week she stayed with us. It wasn't a general complaint. It was a detailed, venomous point-by-point list of every perceived slight, every casual comment I'd made that she had twisted into a vicious insult. Then we found the entry that made the blood freeze in our veins. It was dated 2 days before she brought the peanut-laden groceries into our home. If something happened to her allergic brat, it wouldn't even be my fault, Mark read. His voice now just a choked whisper. Accidents happen all the time. People are just so careless these days. It would be a tragedy, of course. A real shame. But then maybe she'd finally be knocked off her high horse. Maybe then she'd know what real pain feels like. It was all there. Premeditated. Calculated. It wasn't an impulse driven by cravings. It was a plan. My hands were shaking so hard I had to sit down. But the worst was yet to come. Near the end of the journal, we found the entry written after the disastrous birthday party, just before she was institutionalized. They've all turned against me now. Even Mark. He chose her over me. But I'll get my baby back. And then I'll make her pay. I'll make them all pay for taking my family from me. The page was filled with disturbing, violent doodles in the margins. A stick figure of me with large X's for eyes. A crude drawing of our house with angry red flames coming out of the windows. And right next to my name, she had drawn a small, chillingly detailed coffin. Mark made a choked, guttural sound, a sound of pure agony, and dropped the journal as if it had physically burned him. The illusion was finally brutally shattered. The woman he loved, the mother of his child, was a monster. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a horror so profound, so absolute, I thought he might physically break apart. "Oh my God, Laura," he breathed, the words tearing from his throat. "What have I done?" His hands were shaking as he methodically took photos of every single damning page. It wasn't just psychosis. This was evil written in ink. And the author of that evil had just escaped. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. What we found in that diary was chilling, but what happened after she broke out of the facility? It's something no family should ever have to go through. Make sure you stick around because this is where it gets truly terrifying. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The shrill ring of the phone sliced through the quiet of the house, jolting me from a deep sleep. My heart was already pounding before I even answered. Calls at that hour are never good news. It was the psychiatric facility. A frantic-sounding administrator was on the line. There had been an incident. A patient was unaccounted for. A minute later my phone rang again. It was Mark, his voice high-pitched with a panic I had never heard before. "She's gone, Laura. She's gone. She got out during a shift change. They don't know where she is." In that instant our world, which had just started to feel normal again, shrank to the four walls of our house. Life as we knew it slammed to a halt. Tom took an emergency leave from work. We pulled the kids out of school, telling them it was an early spring break. Our home, our sanctuary, transformed overnight into a fortress. We installed new, heavy-duty deadbolts on every door. We hired a company to install a state-of-the-art security system, with cameras covering every blind spot, every possible point of entry. The technicians drilling into our walls felt like a violation, a stark reminder that the danger was no longer theoretical. It was real, and it was coming for us. Mark moved in, sleeping on the couch in the living room, a baseball bat propped against the wall beside him. He barely slept, his face a constant, haggard mask of guilt and fear, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window. The kids could feel our terror, no matter how much we tried to shield them with forced smiles and cheerful voices. They started speaking in whispers. Our once happy, noisy home became heavy with a suffocating, fearful silence. Felt like we were living under siege. For 3 agonizing days there was nothing. A deafening, nerve-shredding silence. The police had an alert out for her, but they seemed frustratingly nonchalant about it. In most of these cases the patient doesn't get far, a young officer told us, his tone professionally reassuring but lacking any real urgency. They usually turn up within 48 hours, cold, hungry, and disoriented. But we knew Jessica wasn't most cases. We showed them the photos of her journal. We told them she wasn't just a confused patient who had wandered off. She was a focused, intelligent predator. And we were her prey. On the fourth night, I was walking through the house, double-checking the locks for the 10th time, my stomach in a tight, painful knot. My phone, which I now carried with me everywhere, pinged with a text message from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was just a few words, a message that turned my blood to ice water in my veins. I see you've redecorated my nursery. Don't worry. I'll fix it when I come home. She was close. She was watching us. She was taunting us. We sent the text immediately to the detective assigned to our case. Within an hour, they had traced it to a burner phone, purchased with cash from a 24/7 convenience store just 2 miles from our house. They sent us a grainy still from the store's security footage. It showed Jessica at the counter, looking calm, focused, and completely sane. She was wearing a cheap blonde wig and a Cleveland Guardians baseball cap. She didn't look sick. She looked determined. That's when we knew we couldn't just sit here and wait for her to strike. We couldn't just be the prey anymore. We had to set a trap. With the police's full, and now very serious cooperation, we devised a plan. The next morning we put on a show. We made a very loud, very public display of packing the car with overnight bags. We strapped the kids and baby Chloe into their car seats in the driveway, talking loudly about going to my mom's house in Cincinnati for a couple of days to get away from the stress. Mark drove them away, taking a long, slow route out of the neighborhood, ensuring they would be clearly visible from any potential hiding spot nearby. To any observer, the house looked empty, abandoned, perfect target. But it wasn't empty. I had slipped back in through the garage. I was now crouched in the dark, stuffy confines of the walk-in closet in our master bedroom, the door cracked just enough to see a sliver of the hallway. On my phone, I had a live feed from every single one of the new security cameras. 2 plainclothes officers were sitting in an unmarked van down the street, their own monitors mirroring mine, waiting for the signal. All we had to do was wait. An hour passed. Then another. My muscles screamed in protest from crouching. Just as I started to think maybe she wasn't coming, a motion alert pinged silently on my phone, the camera covering the back patio. I watched, my heart hammering, as a figure in a blonde wig crept along the back of our house, methodically, patiently testing every window. My fingers trembled as I saw her find the small bathroom window we had deliberately left unlatched. Through the grainy camera feed on my phone, I watched her expertly hoist herself up and slip through the opening. She was inside the house. I sent the final, one-word text to the lead detective. In. Then I silenced my phone completely, held my breath, and waited in the suffocating darkness. The silence that descended upon the house after she entered was absolute and terrifying. It was a weighted silence, thick with menace. The only sound was the frantic, panic drumming of my own heart against my ribs, so loud I was sure she could hear it from the other end of the house. I stayed perfectly still, crouched behind a rack of Tom's winter coats, my eyes glued to the sliver of light from the hallway. I heard the faint, stealthy sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floors. They were light, practiced, not the stumbling of a disoriented person, but the careful tread of a hunter. I tracked her movements through the house on my security camera app, my thumb shaking as I swiped between feeds. She went to the nursery first, the room we had lovingly set up for Chloe. There was a long pause. Then came a sound that will haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, guttural cry of pure, animalistic rage as she found the crib empty. It was the sound of a predator being denied its kill. Then the sounds of destruction began. The sharp, violent crash of the rocking horse against the wall. The splintering of wood as she overturned the changing table. The sound of fabric ripping as she tore the tiny dresses from their hangers. She was annihilating the room in her thwarted fury. My breath hitched in my throat, a sob catching in my chest. I forced it down. I had to stay quiet. Where were the police? My rational mind knew they were waiting for her to settle, to make sure she was alone, to create the safest possible entry. My terrified heart screamed for them to crash through the door now. Her footsteps grew closer, more frantic. She was checking every room, her movements jerky and violent. I heard the door to our master bedroom creak open. I held my breath, my body rigid. Through the crack in the closet door, I could see a slice of the room. She was a whirlwind of rage, yanking open dresser drawers, sweeping their contents onto the floor, muttering to herself in a low, venomous stream. Hiding her from me, she spat, the words a venomous litany. My baby. My family. She'll pay. She'll pay for everything. She was getting closer. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted to break free. She checked under the bed, behind the curtains. Her gaze swept the room and then her eyes, cold and dark, fixed on the closet door. Time seemed to slow down, to stretch into an unbearable, silent eternity. The door flew open with a violent bang, flooding my hiding spot with harsh light. For a split second, we just stared at each other in mutual stunned shock. Her blonde wig was askew, revealing her own matted hair underneath. Her eyes were wide and dilated, burning with a hatred so pure, so intense, it felt like a physical heat radiating across the small space. You, she hissed, the word itself a weapon. You took everything from me. Before I could even draw a breath to scream, she lunged. She was a blur of motion. She was surprisingly strong, her body wiry and fueled by pure adrenaline. Her hands were like claws as she reached for my throat. We crashed backward into the hanging clothes, a chaotic tangle of limbs and flying shoe boxes. Her fingers found my neck, squeezing with a terrifying vice-like strength that immediately cut off my air. Black spots exploded at the edges of my vision. I'm going to finish what I started, she gasped, her face just inches from mine, spittle flying from her lips as she screamed. Her breath was hot and smelled sour. First you, then your brat of a son. He should have eaten those damn cookies. It would have all been over. Her confession, the casual, gleeful way she spoke about murdering my child, didn't fill me with fear. It was like a switch was flipped inside my brain. The terror vanished, vaporized by a white-hot primal rage that was more powerful than anything I had ever felt. The mother bear inside me, the one who had watched her cub almost die twice, finally woke up and roared. I stopped struggling and brought my knee up with all the force I could muster, driving it hard into her stomach. She let out a sharp grunt, her grip loosening for just a fraction of a second. It was the only opening I needed. I twisted my body away, but she was fast, her hand clamping down on my ankle like a steel trap. As I fell to the floor, I spun around and threw a wild, desperate punch. It was a clumsy, uncoordinated blow, but it was fueled by every ounce of my fear and fury. I felt a sickening crunch as my knuckles connected solidly with the bridge of her nose. She fell back, stunned, a look of shocked disbelief on her face. Blood gushed from her nose, stark and red against her pale skin. It was in that moment, as we both lay there on the floor of my messy closet, gasping for air, that the bedroom door finally crashed open. Two huge police officers in tactical gear burst in, guns drawn, shouting commands that sounded like they were coming from underwater. They tackled Jessica to the ground as she started screaming again, this time like a cornered, wounded animal. As they dragged her out of the room, kicking and fighting, she locked eyes with me one last time and mouthed the words, the promise. This isn't over. A cold, terrifying chill went down my spine, because I knew with absolute certainty that she was right. With Jessica apprehended and remanded to a high-security state psychiatric hospital, a fragile, tentative sense of peace began to settle over our home. We started the slow, difficult process of trying to piece our lives back together. The kids went back to school. Tom went back to work. Mark started intensive therapy to deal with his trauma and guilt, and the lengthy legal process began to untangle their lives, with him filing for an emergency divorce and sole custody of Chloe. We naively thought, with a sense of exhausted relief, that the worst was finally over. We were so wrong. The monster, it turned out, had a mother, and she was about to pick up right where her daughter left off. I had only met Evelyn, Jessica's mother, once at their wedding years ago. My memory of her was of a stern, impeccably dressed woman with the same sharp, calculating eyes as her daughter. She had an air of cold superiority that made you feel small in her presence. One afternoon, about a month after Jessica's arrest, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera, and my heart dropped into my stomach. It was her. Standing on my porch, her posture rigid, her face a mask of grim determination. I opened the door just a crack, making sure the heavy-duty security chain was firmly in place. I'm here to see my granddaughter, Chloe, she announced without any preamble. There was no hello, no how are you, just a blunt, imperious demand. Her tone was not that of a grandmother requesting a visit. It was that of a queen demanding tribute. "I'm sorry, Evelyn, but that's not possible right now," I said, my voice polite but firm. "Mark has full and sole custody, and he's not here." Her eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "My daughter told me all about you," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "How you manipulated everyone. How you drove her to a breakdown. How you turned her husband against her and then stole her baby. You're the sick one here, not her." It was breathtaking. It was like listening to Jessica's delusions, spoken with the conviction of absolute truth. I was looking at the source code of my sister-in-law's psychosis. The same twisted narrative, the same refusal to accept an ounce of reality, the same venomous finger-pointing. I realized in that chilling moment that Jessica wasn't just sick. She was the product of a sickness, a generational poison that had been passed down from mother to daughter. The apple hadn't just fallen from the tree. It had been carefully nurtured and cultivated in the most toxic soil imaginable. "I think you should leave," I said, starting to close the door. That's when she wedged her expensive-looking shoe in the door jamb. "I've filed for grandparents' rights," she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "I will see my granddaughter. And when I do, I will make sure she knows exactly what kind of monster her aunt is." The harassment started subtly, just like it had with Jessica. Anonymous, harassing calls to Child Protective Services, claiming we were neglecting Chloe. Each time, a kind but weary social worker named Tamara would have to come out, inspect our home, interview us and the kids, and ultimately close the case as unfounded. It was a soul-crushing, humiliating process designed to wear us down. Then she escalated. The incident that still makes my stomach clench with a mixture of fury and fear happened at Leo's bus stop. We had drilled into our kids' heads, over and over again, to never ever talk to strangers or accept anything from them. One afternoon, Evelyn approached the group of kids waiting for the bus, her face transformed by a sickeningly sweet, grandmotherly smile. She walked right up to Leo and called him by name. "Hello, Leo," she said, her voice like poison wrapped in velvet. She held out a bright, colorful backpack. "Your Aunt Jessica wanted you to have these special treats. She made them just for you. She misses you so much." My son, my brave, smart, incredible boy, didn't hesitate. He took a big step back from her, his little face serious. "I'm not allowed to talk to you," he said loudly and clearly, getting the immediate attention of the parent volunteer on duty. Evelyn's sugary smile instantly vanished, replaced by a flash of pure anger. When the volunteer stepped between her and my son and threatened to call the police, she scurried back to her car and sped away, leaving the backpack sitting ominously on the sidewalk. The school called me immediately. The police met me there. In the principal's office, an officer carefully opened the backpack. Inside, nestled amongst some new-looking toys, were a dozen large homemade cookies, each one individually wrapped in cellophane. They looked innocent enough, but we all knew what they were. The police sent them to the lab for testing. The results came back the next day. They were loaded with peanut butter, with an even higher concentration of peanut protein than normal. A deliberate, calculated attempt to murder my child, delivered with a grandmother's smile. We thought a restraining order would finally stop her. But we had severely underestimated the depths of their shared sickness. Their next move was something I could have never imagined in my worst nightmares. The restraining order was just a piece of paper to a woman like Evelyn, a minor inconvenience. It didn't stop the hate. It just forced it to go underground to become more creative, more insidious. For a few weeks after the bus stop incident, things were quiet. Eerily quiet. We lived in a state of hypervigilance, scrutinizing every unfamiliar car, jumping at every unexpected knock. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with dread. It was the calm before a hurricane, the held breath before the world shatters. The day it happened was a beautiful, perfect Sunday afternoon in late spring. The kind of day that feels deceptive in its perfection, lulling you into a false sense of security. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The air was warm and smelled of freshly cut grass and blooming lilacs. It felt safe. We were trying to reclaim a piece of our normal life. Mark had taken a giggling Chloe to the little neighborhood park across the street, a wide open space where we could see him clearly from our front window. My husband, Tom, was in the backyard with our youngest, pushing him on the swing set. I was at the kitchen table with Leo, the two of us completely absorbed in his big school project, a model of the solar system. We were laughing, our fingers smudged with paint, as he tried to get the swirling colors of Jupiter just right. It was a moment of pure, ordinary domestic happiness. A moment so perfect it almost hurt to look at. Then the doorbell rang. A sharp, jarring sound that cut through our peaceful bubble. I pulled up the security camera feed on my phone. A generic-looking delivery man in a bland brown uniform stood on our porch. He held a large, ornate gift basket, wrapped in shimmering blue cellophane, and a clipboard. It seemed innocuous enough. We'd received a few care packages from concerned friends and family over the past few months. "Stay right here and finish Saturn, sweetie," I told Leo, ruffling his hair. I went to the door, my heart beating just a little faster than it should have. I opened it only as far as the security chain would allow. "Delivery for the family," the man grunted, seeming bored and in a hurry. He shoved the clipboard through the gap for me to sign. I scribbled my name, and he handed over the heavy basket. "It's already paid for," he said, and turned to leave before I could even ask who it was from. I brought the basket inside and set it on the entryway table. It was heavy and elaborate. "Stay here, Leo," I said again, but he was already by my side, his 7-year-old eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it, Mom? Is it a present?" "I don't know, honey." Something felt wrong. A cold, prickling sensation crawled up my spine. My hands trembled slightly as I found the small cream-colored card attached to the ribbon. With a sense of impending doom, I slid the card from its envelope. The message inside was not handwritten. It was printed in an elegant, flowing script, the kind you'd see on a fancy wedding invitation. Just 6 simple words. "Enjoy your last meal together. Love, J. Jessica." Or Evelyn, her loyal soldier. The air was sucked from my lungs. My heart stopped. It wasn't a gift. It was a bomb. It was a threat. "Tom!" I screamed, my voice a raw, terrified sound. "Leo, get back. Get away from the basket. Don't touch." But it was too late. His childlike curiosity, his innocent excitement, had gotten the better of him. "What's in the little packages, Mom?" he asked, his small hand, still smudged with paint from his planet project, reaching out and picking up a small rectangular box wrapped in shiny silver paper. "Leo, no. Put it down," I shouted, lunging for him, my own movements feeling sluggish, like I was moving through water. As he turned the little box over in his hand, a fine tan-colored powder, almost like dust, sifted from a nearly invisible tear in the corner of the wrapping paper. It was a tiny amount, but it was enough. It dusted his curious fingers and the delicate skin of his wrist. I snatched the box from his hand, my mind a screaming vortex of pure terror. Peanut powder. Concentrated. Weaponized. He looked up at me, his face a mask of confusion from my violent reaction. Then his expression changed. His eyes widened in a panic I knew all too well. He looked down at his hand. Angry red, raised hives were already erupting on his skin, spreading up his arm like a furious, unstoppable fire. "Mom!" he gasped, his voice suddenly tight, strangled and wheezy. I don't feel good." His airway was closing. I could hear it. I saw the same terrifying signs from years ago, but this time it was faster, more violent. Anaphylactic shock. It was happening. Right here in our supposedly safe hallway. I screamed again, a raw animal sound of pure maternal terror. I half-dragged, half-carried his suddenly limp body to the kitchen, my mind working on pure adrenaline. I yanked his EpiPen from the emergency drawer, ripped off the blue safety cap with my teeth, and slammed the orange tip hard into his outer thigh. The needle clicked. I held it there for a 10-second count that felt like 100 years. My husband burst in from the backyard, his face white with fear. He saw Leo on the floor, he saw the EpiPen in my hand, and he didn't need a single explanation. He just grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his voice miraculously calm as he said the words I never wanted to hear again. "My son is having a severe anaphylactic reaction." The scene of my son, swollen and gasping for air on our cheerful yellow kitchen floor, will be burned into my memory until the day I die. Sitting in that hospital waiting room, I didn't know if my son would live or die. All I knew was that this had to end. I gave the police everything, praying it would be enough to lock them away forever. My son was fighting for his life, all because of a gift basket. The police now had the evidence they needed, and what they discovered in Evelyn's car as she tried to flee the state. It was more horrifying than anything we'd found in Jessica's diary. You'll want to hear this. The hours I spent in that sterile fluorescent-lit hospital waiting room were the longest and cruelest of my life. Every tick of the clock on the wall was a hammer blow to my heart. Every time a nurse walked past, I would jump, my body flooded with a sickening mix of hope and dread. I paced the worn linoleum floor until I had worn a track in it. I called Mark, my voice breaking as I told him what had happened. He was destroyed, his sobs of guilt and horror so profound I could barely understand him. I replayed the moment over and over in my head. The fine, deadly powder dusting my son's innocent, paint-smudged hand. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, a doctor with kind, exhausted eyes came through the double doors. She walked directly to me. "Laura?" she asked gently. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. "He's stabilized," she said, and the words were the most beautiful I had ever heard. "He's a very strong little boy. It was a severe reaction, one of the worst we've seen. But you acted fast. The EpiPen you administered saved his life. You bought him the time he needed." I collapsed into one of the hard plastic chairs, the relief so overwhelming it felt like a physical blow, knocking all the strength from my limbs. I just sat there and sobbed ugly, gasping sobs of gratitude and lingering terror. They let me see him a little while later. He was so small and fragile in that big hospital bed. His face still puffy and pale, an oxygen monitor clipped to his finger, and 4 lines snaking into his small arm. But he was breathing easily. He was alive. He looked at me with his swollen, drowsy eyes and managed a weak smile. "Hi, Mommy," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Then he asked with a heartbreaking innocence, "Was it Aunt Jessica again?" The fact that my 7-year-old, lying in a hospital bed, could so clearly identify the source of the evil in his life, broke my heart into a million tiny pieces. While my son was fighting for his life, the police were fighting for justice for him. The gift basket was not just a smoking gun. It was an arsenal. They treated our home like a crime scene. The forensics team, wearing gloves and masks, carefully cataloged every item. They found that not only was the silver box full of concentrated peanut protein powder, but several of the gourmet chocolates had been injected with peanut butter, and the artisanal crackers had been dusted with the same deadly powder. It was a meticulously crafted death trap, designed to get my son one way or another. With that evidence, they treated it as what it was, attempted murder. An arrest warrant was issued for Evelyn. A bolo, be on the lookout, was sent to law enforcement in all surrounding states. 2 days later, they found her. A state trooper in Pennsylvania, over 200 miles away, pulled over a gray sedan for a broken taillight. When he ran the plates, the warrant for Evelyn popped up. He arrested her on the spot. And what they found in her car was the final horrifying chapter of her and Jessica's sick, twisted plan. There were more peanut products, of course. A large jar of peanut butter, several bags of peanut M&Ms. But there was also a spiral notebook on the passenger seat. Inside were pages and pages of my son's school schedule, his soccer practice times, our family's routines, detailed surveillance notes. And then there was the last page. It was a hand-drawn, chillingly crude map of our house. Arrows pointed to the windows of the kids' bedrooms, including Leo's. And next to the map, a shopping list, 2 gallons of gasoline, a pack of rags, 3 barbecue lighters. At the bottom of the page she had written in thick, angry, underlined letters, "Finish the job. Eliminate the allergy problem for good." She was going to burn our house down, with all of us inside it. Our next-door neighbor David, a kind, retired firefighter in his 60s, came forward when he heard what happened. He told the detectives that he'd been suspicious of a gray sedan parked down the street for weeks. He thought she was a burglar casing the neighborhood. He gave them his security camera footage. It showed Evelyn day after day, parked just out of sight, watching us, documenting our lives, planning our deaths. His testimony, his simple act of being a good neighbor, was the final nail in her coffin. During her interrogation, Evelyn confessed to everything with a chilling lack of emotion. She admitted to helping Jessica from the beginning, to sending the letters, to the bus stop incident, to the gift basket. Her reason? "They took her baby," she said, her eyes like chips of ice. "They destroyed my daughter's life. They deserved whatever they got. They were finally caught. The immediate threat was over. But the scars remained. And we had to make a decision that would break my heart, but would ultimately save what was left of our family. Leo recovered physically. He came home from the hospital a few days later, a little quieter, a little more watchful but alive. The physical trauma healed, but the emotional trauma, for all of us, runs deep. To this day, he is wary of new packages. He inspects his food with an adult-like seriousness, and he is a little less carefree than he was before. A part of his precious innocence was stolen from him that day on our hallway floor, and that's a crime for which there is no trial and no sentence. Our sense of safety in our own home was shattered, and it's something we are still working day by day to rebuild. In the aftermath, my brother Mark was a ghost, haunting the edges of our life. He was consumed by a guilt so profound, so all-encompassing it was painful to watch. He would sit and hold Chloe for hours, just staring at her perfect little face, tears silently streaming down his own. "This is my fault, Laura," he said to me one night, his voice broken and raw. "All of it. I brought this evil into your lives. I defended it. I was so blind. I almost got your son killed." I tried to tell him it wasn't his fault, that he was manipulated by a master, that he was a victim too. But we both knew that things could never truly be the same. He had to heal, and more importantly, he had to protect his daughter from the toxic legacy of her mother. He made the hardest, bravest decision of his life. A company he used to work for had an office in Portland, Oregon. He accepted a job transfer. He decided to move, to take Chloe across the country, to give her a chance at a life that wasn't defined by the shadow of her mother's crimes. Saying goodbye to them at the airport was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I had come to love that little girl as if she were my own. My kids sobbed as they hugged their baby cousin goodbye. But as I watched my brother walk down the jet bridge, holding his daughter tight, I knew he was doing the right thing. He was breaking the cycle. Our lives are different now. We talk to Mark and Chloe every single day. We watch her grow up through a screen, celebrating her first steps, her first words, her first day of preschool from thousands of miles away. It's not the same, but it's enough. She is a happy, thriving, bubbly little girl. I see shadows of Jessica in the shape of her eyes or the curve of her smile sometimes, but I see none of her in her spirit. Chloe is full of light and laughter. She is living proof that darkness is not inherited. It is a choice. Jessica and Evelyn are where they belong. Jessica was transferred to a maximum security forensic psychiatric hospital, where she will likely remain for a very, very long time. The doctors say her prognosis for recovery is poor. Evelyn was convicted of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit arson. She will spend the rest of her life in prison. Justice, at least the legal kind, was served. But there are no real winners in a story like this. We all lost something. This entire ordeal taught me a hard, painful, and invaluable lesson. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who want to spill it. True family is about choice. It's about who you stand with when the world is on fire. It's my husband, Tom, who was my rock, who never once doubted me. It's my incredible children, who are so much braver and more resilient than I ever was. It's my neighbor, David, a man we barely knew, who was watching out for us when we didn't even know it. It's my brother who, despite his mistakes, is raising his daughter with a fierce, unconditional love that is the complete opposite of the poison he came from. That is my family. The one we chose. The one we built from the ashes. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It means more than you know. It's important for us to share these experiences, to warn others, and to heal together. This nightmare taught me that sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones you're supposed to be able to trust. Our family survived because we leaned on each other and never ever gave up. Have you ever had to deal with a family member whose jealousy or entitlement turned into something truly dangerous? Share your story in the comments below. It's so important for us to know that we're not alone in these struggles. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. And if you have been through something similar, please always remember, you are a survivor.